Frank Miller is one of the most legendary comic book writers and artists of all time, though his history from a quality standpoint and some of the edginess of his more recent work has led him to not be as universally beloved as he once was. Modern comic fans seem to kind of just ignore his good output based on the universal idea that he's actually just the most overhyped trash connoisseur ever. But I firmly disagree personally. His Daredevil run and The Dark Knight Returns especially are two classics that hold up super well in today's day and age, and this used to not be such a controversial take, but these days it might be. Whatever. Batman as a character has its roots in the dark noir detective pulps of the 1920s and 30s, like The Shadow. However, with the invention of the comics code in America, as America became more tight-laced and conservative, Batman started getting a bit more family-friendly, which one thing led to another, and that all sort of became his reputation, which is why the Batman 1960s TV show was the way it was, since it was largely based on Batman from the 1950s and early 60s, which has this strict comics code behind it. Adam West's Batman became the norm for a long time before Neil Adams and Denny O'Neil, along with others, were allowed to bring some darkness back to Batman. Frank Miller, for his part, envisioned an old man Batman back to fight crime after a break, since the world needed him, inspired by films like Dirty Harry and the characters of his fourth film, Sudden Impact. The idea being, by and large, the antithesis of Batman from the 1960s show, and a Batman that would be a major push in the direction of the more serious character we have today, especially in expanded media like The Batman by Matt Reeves. Legendary comic industry veteran John Byrne is said to have been the one to recommend a young female Robin who would become Carrie Kelly as the writing process continued. The Dark Knight Returns works as a possible future for Batman, basing the background on the current DC continuity, but obviously diverging, as comics would have future developments that came along in the mainstream universe that definitively decanonized this. Additionally, Batman Year One, which is considered canon to post-crisis Batman, is also canon to the Dark Knight Returns universe. Alright, so following the death of Jason Todd Robin, Batman hangs up the suit and retires to live as a hermit. 10 years passed and Gotham has become shittier than ever, a new street gang, the Mutants, really slumming the place up. Following an encounter with a gang in Crime Alley, Bruce basically has a psychosis that sends him spiraling right back into the suit for Batman. Soon he saves a young girl, Carrie Kelly, and she is inspired by Batman. We soon learn lots of his rogues gallery have changed over the years, Two-Face getting facial reconstruction surgery and seemingly being reformed, Joker going catatonic, then pretending to be reformed for a second as well. Anyhow, Dent ends up not being so reformed, attempting to hold Gotham ransom, threatening to blow the city up. Batman, of course, beats him, and Two-Face is totally reborn. We meet this world's Superman, who is a patriot embodying the American way, while truth and justice may fall a bit to the wayside. Superman is friends with Ronald Reagan, who is interested in what Batman is doing in Gotham, Reagan thinking Batman needs to be brought in. Meanwhile, Carrie Kelly is starting to form her identity, inspired by Batman. She decides she'll become the new Robin, forming a suit and taking to the streets of Gotham City. Batman starts feeling his age a bit after fighting some mutants, being challenged in a hand-to-hand brawl and getting beaten near to death. Though Carrie Kelly saves him, Batman is so impressed that Carrie saved him that he brings her to the Batcave and is considering bringing her on as the new Robin, then returning to beat up the mutant leader who almost killed him, leaving his ego at the door this time and managing to beat him with his brain a bit more. The mutants live in this animalistic pack structure, but seeing their leader beaten, the whole gang fractures. One gang is formed, the Sons of Batman, who start fighting crime under the banner of Batman since they worship him for beating up their leader. Superman is proving to be America's superweapon, going to the war-torn country of Corto Maltese, acting as Ronald Reagan's hand. Not really questioning the morals, just doing whatever the president wants. Commissioner Gordon has retired and is replaced with Commissioner Yandel, who wants Batman brought in on charges of vigilantism. Joker starts a major crime spree by getting on the news, fainting being reformed, but then he kills everyone at the station. Batman and his new Robin track down Joker and fight him, Batman paralyzing the villain to take him out for good. Joker, thinking he's a coward for not killing him, just kills himself during this fight. Superman is still fighting a war he has no business in, diverting a nuclear crisis, but following that, an EMP takes out the United States power grid. Anyhow, Batman gets the mutants to become a street gang for good, managing the crime of Gotham and creating some of the lowest crime rates in the country. This embarrasses Ronald Reagan, who orders Superman to bring him in on charges. Superman pulls up, but Batman, during the fight, brings backup, with Superman being shot by a kryptonite arrow from Oliver Queen, the former Green Arrow. Batman beats Superman, but seemingly has a heart attack, killing him. Alfred dies after destroying Wayne Manor and the Batcave to cover up the evidence of Batman. And at Bruce's funeral, Superman hears his heartbeat, knowing he lived, the Batman going underground with Oliver and Robin, as well as the mutants for this new underground war on crime for this new generation of Batman. Bruce Wayne, or Batman, takes the suit back up after seeing all the damage that has been caused by the criminals and street gangs in his absence. Batman is more violent than before, just brutalizing criminals, and the art matches this. One thing that is interesting about Batman in this is that he takes his obsession with crime fighting to a whole new level. This is more of a mental illness. He definitely has a moral code still. For example, when he downright refused to kill the Joker despite all the blood on Joker's hands and him physically paralyzing the man. And he personally blames himself for everything the Joker's done. Batman takes on a new Robin through Carrie Kelly and seems eager to add him to his team, despite the death of Jason, leading him to retire in the first place. It's one part her skill and courage, but moreover feels like Batman is going through this midlife crisis. He wants things to be the way it once was before he retired. Another example of this is when Bruce went to fight the mutant boss, who he tried fighting head-on like he may have as a younger man, something that simply doesn't work when you're 50 years old. Bruce faked his death at the end of this book, Alfred destroying Wayne Manor and effectively killing Bruce Wayne, replacing him fully with Batman. This is kind of the inverse of how the start of the book was, where Bruce Wayne was living and Batman was dead for the past 10 years, and Batman starting his underground cult and leading them to this new crime-fighting salvation is kind of the death of Bruce Wayne, which is an interesting new angle on Batman. Carrie Kelly is the new Robin. She was mugged and felt helpless, but seeing Batman, she idolized him, following him and becoming his new Robin after he saw her as an opportunity to more or less relive his glory days with Dick and Jason. I like Carrie. I think this character in some ways would reflect the introduction of Tim Drake a few years later in 1989. Tim idolizing Batman, following him around and starting grassroots to become Robin before Batman officially takes him on. Carrie Kelly is a major character in Miller's Dark Knight universe, but shockingly hasn't had much in the mainstream books. Carrie being introduced to the main world in Batman and Robin Volume 219, but honestly never really being an essential character. She was just kind of a side character showing up in a few issues. Two-Face, or Harvey Dent, has been cured, or so they say. In reality, he is kind of like the Joker, where Arkham polished up the guy and hoped for the best. Batman returning brings back the villains. It's kind of a cause and effect thing. Turns out, despite some plastic surgery and a recovered face, he wasn't really all there, holding Gotham hostage and doing his Two-Face shenanigans again. Joker is still Batman's antithesis. After years in Arkham, he decides to have a grand finale killing spree, which is great, but he's really a function of Batman's arc here. Joker hoping to push this new, more brutal Batman into finally breaking his code and killing him, since he sees this new Batman as a complete nut job. Ultimately, Joker doesn't get killed by Batman, killing himself instead, but it's a good moment that defines, well, our new Batman is a nutcase and perhaps a shell of the man he once was. He is a nutcase who religiously wants to relive his glory days, down to the same old dusty rulebook he played by, if admittedly a bit stretched compared to his youth. Ronald Reagan is the main villain of this book. Well, not Ronald Reagan really, but more so this kind of idea of the ass backwards, business first, wars first, people last kind of American that was sort of the backbone of politics at the time. I mean, what's more overt than the scene in issue 2, which sees Nathan Biggs, a 4-star general, commit suicide in an American flag since his military benefits don't cover his wife's life-saving care. Previously, I talked about Longbow Hunters, which criticized the CIA and its shadier drug operations of the 1980s. Of course, in a fictionalized setting, but this kind of distrust in the government bled into the pages of the darker superhero revolution of the time we saw in the 1980s, with the aforementioned Longbow Hunters, this, and Alan Moore's Watchmen being some key examples of books that absolutely roasted the politics of the era. Ronald Reagan's fist in the book is Superman, who looks like a caricature drawing of Superman, and honestly, this character is such a little prick, but also, it's not personal. Superman's famous byline, truth, justice, and the American way, are really the keys to his arc. Frank Miller imagining a Superman who's been doing this so long, the truth and justice kind of got lost in favor of the American way, and he more or less doesn't think for himself anymore and just acts in the interest of the government. He didn't do all this with Batman to be a dick exclusively, but he's just a blind follower of America, which, like a lot of Americans, actually just means the President of the United States and his will. Oliver Queen, the former Green Arrow, has joined Batman's fight. In the comics, Denny O'Neil and Neil Adams got Oliver and made him into an ultra-liberal hippie revolutionary type. He also has this kind of autonomy code, which we see in Identity Crisis by Brad Meltzer. Batman's rules sometimes boil down to, well, I didn't kill them, so it's fine. Green Arrow follows more of a gray scale, not really believing in an overarching big brother government, which Superman quite literally embodies in this book. I say this to basically bring up that he was pretty eager to help Batman defeat Superman, with him showing up in the final conflict. Superman actually took one of Oliver's arms off at one point, so he is also kind of here for that vendetta. We don't get a whole ton of them in this book, but it really continues the through line of Oliver Queen, and naturally in a situation like this, Oliver Queen would become kind of an underground revolutionary. Frank Miller more or less had total control over the project, editor Dick Giordano and Denny O'Neil sort of taking a back seat. He did the writing and pencils on the project with inks from Klaus Janson and colors from Lynn Varley. The art is very caricature-esque and exaggerated. I really enjoy it, the bulky Batman also being very iconic, a lot of this imagery directly being pulled into many sources, but probably most impactful on the overall image of the Batman character, Batman vs. Superman. And, look, I made a video on this, so you can see what I think about it, but all I'm saying is the look is iconic and has been constantly referenced. I don't think Batman v Superman really did a good job capturing this book in any way, but Zack Snyder also did a direct Watchmen adaptation that didn't really capture Watchmen correctly either, so you can't really be surprised. I also like the really washed colors from Lynn Varley. It looks pretty gritty and fits the material really well. The Dark Knight Returns loves playing with panels, which is another pretty cool thing it does. There are pages with a dozen or more panels, which is very non-standard for its time and allows them to give more beat by beat or show emotions on a close-up scale. And I also think this comic controls pacing better than a lot of comic books do, where the pacing is more interpretive, I feel. This book has a strange tone. The best way I can describe it is a dark satire. It actually feels a lot like RoboCop, which actually has some similar themes: big corporations, big government. We even have satirical news scenes like RoboCop. Reflecting this, perhaps ironically, Frank Miller would write the second and third RoboCop films and even work on some RoboCop comics throughout the years. On top of that, Peter Weller would play Batman in the animated film adaptation of this book, which we'll look at eventually. This was kind of an attitude that we saw in the late 80s, this nihilistic punk political stuff, and Miller absolutely loved it at the time. I also feel that adds to the grit of the book, that almost makes you feel like you're reading an indie comic or a 1980s zine and not a world-famous comic character who has grossed over $30 billion over the years. It's something I can't imagine would ever be earnestly replicated in that regard and feel so authentic in today's day and age. This book is classic. It's nihilistic, grungy, and does amazing things with art, paneling, pacing, and writing that undeniably revolutionized new things in the Batman world, but also new things within the comic book medium as a whole. This book has been published in 13 different editions. It had an animated film, as I mentioned, as well as being kind of awkwardly retrofitted into Batman v Superman, along with 300 other plot lines Zack wanted to waste in that film. I think you really can't go wrong with this book. It is one of a kind. Nothing like this could ever be made again. It's too unique. A sequel would be produced, The Dark Knight Strikes Again, as well as a third, The Dark Knight Master Race, and I'll be reviewing all three at some point. I'm curious, I've only ever read this one. Check out my other comic book videos on this channel, and videos on other stuff I mentioned here. It's all on my channel on the end screen. I've done RoboCop. I've done some Batman stuff. You'll love it. It's great. Just click one of the playlists at the end here.